Sean Diddy Combs is experiencing a complete mental breakdown in his jail cell as Cassie has successfully outmaneuvered his entire revenge strategy. The way everything has unfolded is genuinely more chaotic than anyone anticipated. He's literally pacing around like a caged animal, not just because he's physically confined, but because he's spiraling over the fact that the woman he spent years trying to destroy just secured $30 million and disappeared to another country, leaving him with nothing but his damaged hands and his even more damaged reputation. And honestly, good for her. If you've been following this nightmare saga from the beginning, you already know about the hotel surveillance footage, the freak-offs, and the federal charges. But what's happening right now represents a completely new chapter that reveals exactly how Diddy operates when he loses control. Before diving into the absolute chaos unfolding currently, if you're enjoying these breakdowns, make sure to hit subscribe to Metro Society so you don't miss anything. Trust me, this story keeps getting stranger by the week. Every time you think it's reached rock bottom, someone digs a basement underneath the basement, and then we discover the basement had a trapdoor. Here's what actually triggered Diddy's latest jailhouse meltdown. TMZ obtained a court declaration that Cassie filed on May 1st in her ongoing lawsuit. In it, she states very clearly, and you can almost hear her saying this in that soft, calm voice she has, "I reside outside of the United States. I do not intend to move back to the United States." She also made it crystal clear that while she's still a U.S. citizen, she is not a resident of California anymore. This wasn't some impulsive vacation decision. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment, I need a break, trip to a spa in Switzerland. This was strategic. She received word through channels that Diddy was actively plotting what he was going to do to her, and she simply removed herself from the equation entirely. The man who once controlled every aspect of her life, what she wore, who she talked to, where she went, what she ate, what she said in interviews, now can't even get within the same hemisphere as her, and that is driving him absolutely insane. The timeline here matters because it shows how calculated Cassie's moves have been. She testified in Diddy's federal criminal trial last summer while she was pregnant and living in New York. Let that sink in for a moment. She was carrying a child, dealing with all the physical and emotional demands of pregnancy, and she still walked into that courtroom and faced the man who abused her for years. She sat there, visibly pregnant, and looked directly at him while she gave her testimony. She didn't flinch. She didn't waver. She did what the legal system required. Then, after receiving that $30 million payout, $20 million directly from Diddy over the alleged abuse, plus another $10 million from the hotel that covered everything up and sold the footage to him, she quietly made her exit. She didn't announce it. She didn't call a press conference. She didn't do a victory lap on social media. She just filed her paperwork, packed up her family, and left. No drama, no spectacle, no parting shots, just silence and an ocean between her and her abuser. This is where Diddy's psychology gets really interesting in the most disturbing way possible. Sources close to the situation, and I'll be honest, take this with a grain of salt because who even knows if anyone's actually talking to Diddy's people right now, and if they are, they're probably lying through their teeth. But the word is that Diddy was genuinely banking on Cassie staying in the United States. He had an entire plan mapped out for when he gets out on appeal. He was going to make her life miserable. He was going to harass her, intimidate her, make her feel unsafe, get his people to close in on her. He was going to file motions and make phone calls and send messages through intermediaries. He was going to remind her at every possible opportunity that she could never truly escape him. The man literally thought he was going to get his revenge, as they say. He was going to take back every dollar, restore his reputation, and prove that nobody walks away from him without paying for it. That was the fantasy he was nursing in his jail cell. That was the dream keeping him warm at night, and Cassie just evaporated it overnight with a single court filing. What makes this even more pathetic is that Diddy's entire network of enablers is crumbling financially. His associates can barely afford to get to the Southern District of New York for his court appearances. They can barely afford parking. Some of them are reportedly borrowing money just to show up and look supportive in the courtroom gallery. The idea that they're going to somehow track Cassie down internationally and execute whatever deranged revenge scheme Diddy cooked up is laughable. It's beyond laughable. It's the kind of delusion that requires a complete detachment from reality. The man who once had unlimited resources and an army of people willing to do anything for his approval, run errands, deliver packages, intimidate business associates, keep their mouths shut about what they saw at parties, is now reduced to pacing in a cell while his former associates cry on podcasts about how the industry abandoned them. Stevie J and Young Miami can go on whatever podcast they want and weep about nobody returning their calls. That's what happens when you tie your entire identity to someone currently facing federal charges. That's what happens when your entire career is built on proximity to power that no longer exists. But let's talk about what Diddy is really angry about, because it's not just that Cassie left. It's that she left with more money, more access, more freedom, and more dignity than he will likely have for the rest of his life. This is a man who thought he had completely destroyed her. He punished her, shamed her, mocked her, humiliated her on a scale most people can't even comprehend. He got her hooked on drugs. His own lawyers admitted in court that Cassie was high out of her mind during much of what happened, though they tried to twist that into some kind of defense for him as if her being incapacitated somehow made his actions less monstrous. He orchestrated situations where she had to perform, had to say things, had to degrade herself while he watched. He treated her like a possession, like a doll he could pose and position and control. And somehow, despite all of that, despite years of systematic psychological destruction, she walked away with $30 million, a husband who actually protects her, children who are thriving, and a life overseas that he can't touch. He can't even send a text message that reaches her. He can't have one of his associates accidentally run into her at a restaurant. He can't do anything except sit in a cell and think about how completely she escaped him. The husband part is crucial here because Alex Fine is not like the other men who cycled through Cassie's life when Diddy was controlling everything. There were rumors, and I believe them, that Alex actually stepped to Diddy directly. This was back when Cassie and Diddy were supposedly done, but Diddy was still pulling his usual "that's my girl" routine, and every other man in the industry would scatter the moment Diddy asserted ownership over her. They'd get a look from him at a party or a phone call from one of his people, and suddenly they'd be nowhere to be found. Alex allegedly looked at him and said, essentially, "Come see me. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is she." That was the first time anyone had genuinely stood up to Diddy over Cassie without eventually backing down. Kid Cudi had his moment. He dated Cassie briefly, and we all know what happened there. His car got blown up. But Cassie ended up going back to Diddy after that situation. The cycle continued. Alex stayed. Alex married her. Alex built a family with her. And now Alex is presumably with her wherever she's resettled, living a life that Diddy can only fantasize about from a prison cell. A life with family dinners and bedtime stories and morning coffee and all the simple human things that Diddy traded away for power and control. The obsession Diddy has with Cassie goes beyond normal ex-boyfriend bitterness. This isn't someone who's just upset that his ex moved on. This is a man who built his entire identity around power and control, and Cassie represents the one person who dismantled all of it. She's the reason the hotel footage exists. She's the reason the lawsuit happened. She's the reason federal investigators started digging. She's the crack in the dam that became a flood. Everything that has collapsed around Diddy, the criminal charges, the civil suits, the loss of his business empire, the public disgrace, traces back to her decision to finally speak out after years of silence. Instead of any kind of self-reflection, instead of a single moment of "what have I done?" his response is to plot revenge from jail. He wants to break up her marriage. He wants to insert chaos into her peaceful life. He still believes that if he could just get close enough to her, he could make her see, make her come back, make her submit again. It's not love. It was never love. It's pathological control dressed up in romance, and the mask is completely off now. It's been off for a while actually, but now it's been incinerated. The thing that keeps circling in my mind is how small all of this is, literally and figuratively. We've all heard the rumors about Diddy's anatomy. Sly Diggler, who was involved in the situation, apparently confirmed certain details, with some people saying it can retract down to the size of a Tootsie Roll. And look, I'm not someone who thinks body shaming is the answer to everything. But there's a pattern here that's impossible to ignore. The Jeffrey Epstein comparisons write themselves. Another powerful man with alleged physical insecurities who channeled that rage into systematic abuse of women. Is that really what this is about? You feel inadequate, so you spend decades beating women, drugging them, trafficking them, filming them without consent, making them perform while you watch, all because you couldn't process your own insecurities like a functional human being? You couldn't go to therapy, you couldn't have a single honest conversation with yourself in the mirror. You couldn't have funded scholarships, you could have addressed world hunger, you could have built hospitals, you could have done literally anything else with your billions of dollars. Instead, you tried to make the world pay for what you perceived as a gross personal inadequacy. You tried to make everyone around you feel as small as you felt inside. And now everyone can see it. Everyone can see exactly what you were trying to hide. The women who still support him through all of this represent a whole different layer of disturbing behavior. The hierarchy of enablers around Diddy is something I genuinely cannot wrap my head around. You have the men who did his dirty work, which is bad enough. Then you have the women who support those men. Then you have the women actively trying to get picked by the men who abuse women. Each layer becomes more pathetic than the last. Each layer requires more self-deception, more willful blindness, more active participation in a system designed to harm people just like them. At what point do you feel shame? At what point do you look at the hotel hallway footage of a beaten woman, a woman in a towel trying to escape being dragged back down the hallway, and think, maybe I should find a different circle to run in? At what point do you realize that your proximity to power doesn't protect you, it just makes you the next potential victim? Cassie's declaration about leaving the country is tied to an ongoing case, and nobody knows exactly where she is now. I have some guesses, but I'm not going to speculate publicly, because Diddy's people do still watch these videos, and frankly, they're not getting any information from me. They can do their own research. They can waste their own time. What I will say is that the financial reality of Diddy's remaining loyalists makes international pursuit basically impossible. These people can barely function domestically. They're struggling to pay for gas to get to the courthouse. The idea that they're going to fund an international search, hire investigators overseas, navigate foreign legal systems, and somehow track down a woman with $30 million and no fixed U.S. address is absurd. It's the kind of fantasy you cook up when you've been surrounded by yes men for so long that you've forgotten how the real world works. If Cassie chose her location carefully, with expert advice and significant resources, she's not coming back until she feels like it, if ever. She might never set foot on American soil again, and that is entirely her right. The TMZ coverage framing this as Cassie fleeing is honestly ridiculous. Nobody flees with $30 million. Fleeing implies desperation, implies running from something with nothing, implies fear and scarcity and last-minute decisions. Cassie relocated strategically after securing generational wealth and legal victories. That's not fleeing, that's winning. That's making a calculated decision to protect your peace and your family. She looked at the situation, Diddy's trial, his supporters foaming at the mouth outside the courthouse, the men acting like absolute animals, the entire toxic circus playing out in the media, and decided her family didn't need to be anywhere near it. Why would she stay? So Diddy could try to execute whatever revenge scheme he's been cooking up? So she could look over her shoulder every time she goes to the grocery store? So her children could grow up in an environment where their mother's abuser might send people to harass them? She made the rational choice that anyone with her resources and her history would make. She prioritized safety and stability over spectacle. The hotel payout is worth underlining because it shows how deep the institutional cover-up went. $10 million from a hotel chain that sold surveillance footage to the man who beat a woman in their hallway. They watched the footage. They knew what was on it. They saw a woman being assaulted. And instead of calling the police, instead of intervening, instead of doing the bare minimum required by basic human decency, they sold the evidence to the abuser and only paid up when they got caught. Cassie got $10 million for that, and honestly, it should have been more. The fact that multiple institutions and individuals enabled Diddy's behavior for decades is the only reason he ever got as far as he did. Hotels, record labels, lawyers, assistants, drivers, security guards, party planners, hangers-on, an entire ecosystem of people who either looked the other way or actively participated because the money was good and the access was better. Everyone had a price, and Diddy knew exactly what it was. Now, Diddy is in jail waiting to see if his appeal goes anywhere, and he's reportedly furious. Not remorseful, not reflective, not spending his time thinking about the harm he caused or the lives he destroyed. Furious. He's angry that his plans are foiled, angry that Cassie is beyond his reach, angry that she's living a life he can't sabotage. He's pacing around like he's still somebody, like his name still carries weight beyond the prison walls. But the reality is that his name, his reputation, his influence, and his money are all gone or severely diminished. The brand partnerships have evaporated. The industry connections have gone silent. The people who used to return his calls within 30 seconds now pretend they never knew him. The only thing he might have when he gets out, if he gets out, is access to consensual relationships that don't involve payment, because anything else would be a parole violation. And even that assumes anyone wants to be associated with him after everything that's come out. Even that assumes there's a single person on earth who watched that hotel footage and thought, yes, I'd like to spend time with that man voluntarily. Cassie, meanwhile, is somewhere overseas with her husband and her children enjoying the kind of peace that $30 million and a clean conscience can buy. She wakes up in the morning without fear. She goes to sleep at night without nightmares about what he might do next. She doesn't have to attend any more trials unless she chooses to. She doesn't have to see Diddy's face or hear his voice or wonder what he's planning. She doesn't have to scan a room for threats when she walks in. She removed herself from the board entirely, and that's the one move Diddy never anticipated. He thought he could always get to her. He thought proximity was inevitable. He thought that as long as she was in the United States, as long as she was within reach of his remaining network, he could find a way to insert himself back into her life. He was wrong. He was wrong about everything. The man who once controlled every aspect of her existence now has zero access to her, and that is the most fitting ending to this chapter anyone could have written. Diddy can keep punching the air in his cell, plotting schemes that will never materialize, drafting revenge fantasies that will never leave the pages of his prison notebook, while Cassie lives her life thousands of miles away from his reach. The power dynamic has completely inverted, and the person who spent decades making others feel small and trapped is now the one confined to a cell, reduced to pacing and scheming and seething, while the woman he tried to destroy thrives without him. She's out there somewhere, probably in a beautiful home with natural light and a garden, raising her children, loving her husband, building a future, while he stares at concrete walls and thinks about what he lost. If there's any justice in this story, that's exactly where he'll stay.